The Trump administration is ready to squeeze China dry. The CCP is terrified. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Well, folks, it's time to take a break from fighting YouTube censorship so we can fight Apple censorship. For the last few months, we've been building you an exclusive China Uncensored app. Or at least we designed it, programmed it, and submitted it to Apple for review. They typically approve or reject an app within 48 hours, a week at most. We submitted our app for review more than a month ago, on January 24th. After 2 weeks, we hadn't gotten a response, so we applied to expedite Apple's processing. Still no response. Weird. So we pulled that version and resubmitted it, hoping it would land with a new reviewer. Still no response. Now it's been more than a month. No one from Apple has contacted us, and they won't approve or even reject our app, which they probably won't do because they have no legitimate cause to reject our app. We tried everything we could, and now we're concerned that Apple is actually censoring us. But they don't want to explicitly say so, so they're ghosting us. An apple a day is keeping us away. You might ask, but Chris, aren't you being paranoid? Maybe. Except Apple has censored China Uncensored before. Back in 2017, we built an app for Apple TV. Apple approved it, but then immediately blocked it in mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. Their excuse? Apps must comply with all legal requirements in any location where you make them available. Well, our app did comply with the laws in Hong Kong and Taiwan, but it took 10,000 of you signing this online petition to Apple to pressure them to uncensor us, which was kind of important since uncensored is our whole thing. So here's what I want you to do now. Sign our new petition calling on Apple to not censor the China Uncensored app. The link is in the description. But hey, maybe it's all just a big misunderstanding or just a simple technical delay. That would be great. In which case, the petition is just expressing your enthusiastic support for the coming China Uncensored iOS app. So thank you for signing. Now, back to the episode. And it's about time this happened. The White House just put out its America First Investment Policy Memorandum. This is incredibly important. It could completely upend the CCP's plans. In the memo, the White House publicly acknowledges what I've been saying since I first started China Uncensored. The CCP weaponizes economic ties to undermine U.S. national security. Chinese investment in the American technology sector has siphoned off valuable IP to build up China's military and surveillance state. China was also somehow allowed to buy up U.S. farmland, often coincidentally near U.S. military installations. China also made itself both supplier and saboteur of U.S. electric grids, with backdoor access to potentially shut down U.S. power. There's also Chinese investments in U.S. ports, which, alongside with Chinese cranes, has the potential of spying on U.S. shipping and remotely wrecking U.S. supply chains. You might be wondering, how was this allowed to go on? For decades! China certainly wouldn't allow the U.S. to have this kind of power inside China. U.S. companies aren't allowed anywhere near its own critical infrastructure and technology. They won't even let the U.S. corner the market on fried chicken. Well, finally, the U.S. is putting a stop to it with some pretty brilliantly targeted policy. The Trump administration rightly points out that economic security is national security. The memorandum wants to turn off the tap of American money flooding into China to help the CCP develop bleeding-edge technology like AI, quantum tech, biotechnology, hypersonics, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, and more. A big source of that money was U.S. pension funds. Yes, if you have a pension, you're invested in China, America's greatest adversary, whether you want to be or not. That's right, just trust your retirement to a country that doesn't want you to live long enough to see retirement. At the same time, the memorandum restricts Chinese access to things like our power grid and farms, leading many to think, how have we not already been doing this? The Trump administration is also going to reevaluate how Chinese companies listed on American stock exchanges are audited. This was something Trump tried to do at the end of his first term. You see, China wouldn't allow American regulators to audit Chinese companies because China said corporate information was a state secret and the US let them get away with that. Fraud was rampant and billions of US investment dollars disappeared. The worst example of this was Luckin Coffee. It inflated its revenue by $300 million. When it was discovered, the stock price collapsed. American investors lost big. An audit would have helped. And Trump is also looking to crack down on Chinese shell companies, because if you think the fraud thing was crazy, this is even crazier. When you buy shares of a Chinese company in the US, you're not buying shares in that company. You're actually buying shares in a shell company, usually in the Cayman Islands. Most people have no idea about this. That's because the CCP doesn't actually want foreigners buying shares in Chinese companies for national security reasons. But they do want your money, so Chinese companies set up these shell companies to just sell stocks to Americans. And the US government was like, this is fine. But perhaps the most revolutionary thing about the America First investment policy is how unprofitable the Trump administration is going to make it for China to do business in the US. And one of the ways it's going to do that is by charging Chinese ships $1 million for every port of call. Let me repeat, $1 million every time a ship from a Chinese-owned company visits a US port. And I thought parking here in New York was expensive. So why is the US doing this? Well, it's not an arbitrary fee. It's because the US Trade Representative launched an investigation into China's dominance of the shipping industry. That was under the Biden administration. Right before Trump took office, they published their report. And they found that the CCP has targeted the shipping and shipbuilding industries in order to basically control them. Sounds familiar. For example, China builds more than half of the world's ships. That's a huge problem, which explains why this fee is actually higher for non-Chinese companies using Chinese-made ships. That's right, this isn't just Chinese ships from China. It's any company that has Chinese-made ships. There's a proposal to have them pay up to $1.5 million for every port call. Up to $1.5 million for every port call. This is like a reverse Oprah, where instead of giving things away, it's charging folks. You pay $1 million, you pay $1 million. And guess what? There's an additional charge of up to $1 million per port call for companies that have orders with Chinese shipyards. You pay $1 million. An operator can even have 0 Chinese-made ships and still get a $500,000 fee if it has an order with a Chinese shipyard. And those with greater than 50% Chinese-built fleets would pay $1 million per vessel entry regardless of origin. Given that most ships make around 3 port calls per voyage to the US, that's already like a gazillion more dollars being pumped right into the US's coffers, and a serious attempt to break China's hold on shipbuilding. While Chinese-made ships get fined, American ships get up to $1 million in refunds per US port entry. Though if the US wants to see people use more American ships, then it better catch up on its shipbuilding. Their production schedule is slower than Rockstar Games, still waiting for Grand Theft Auto 6, guys. Something that not a lot of people are talking about, because it's going to sound boring until I explain why it's incredible, is another US Trade Representative proposal to restrict China's National Transportation and Logistics Public Information Platform access to US shipping data or banning US ports from using Logic software. That is literally telling the CCP the location of every American ship on the planet. Now keep in mind, these are all just proposals. It's not final. There will be a public hearing on it later this year in March. But if the proposals pass as they stand, it would be a huge loss for China and a major win, not just for the US, but US allies and shipbuilding powerhouses like South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. The rest of the world would be encouraged to use their ships and rely less on China's ships and shipyards if they want to keep the US market. China, of course, would have everyone believe that these kinds of measures are going to hurt US consumers by raising costs and fueling US inflation. And the mainstream media is right there with them. along with universities. I wonder why. Probably all that careful research. But China never plays fair. The longer the world allows China to weaponize trade and investment, the more we'll all pay in the long term, especially if China feels emboldened enough to do something devastatingly stupid like attack Taiwan or shut down the US power grid. It's long past time to take action. And you know who else isn't playing fair? That's right, Apple, which just so happens to rely on the China market for more than $50 billion in revenue per year. Weird coincidence that Apple could be censoring the China Uncensored app by refusing to either approve it or reject it. So click below and sign this petition to tell Apple to not censor the China Uncensored app. Once again, that link is below. I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching China Uncensored.